This evening's rebroadcast of the Legislative Breakfast is being brought to you exclusively by Springs Valley Bank and Trust, where the focus is on you.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Dave Crooks, and I serve about two-thirds of DuBois County, besides Pike and Davies and Martin counties. Regrets today from Representative Oxley. He's at a third house event in Austin today with other legislators in that region. Representative Stillwell's excuse was not nearly as good as Denny's. He and his wife, Joe, had already had a previously planned trip, and this is our midway point of the session to where we actually get 6 straight nights away from Indianapolis. So most members figured out a way to sneak out of town for a few days, and I guess I wasn't quite as creative. So, but glad to be here with you today to give you an update on the first half of the legislative session. It's been a quick 2 months so far. We had about 1,400 bills filed in the House. About 200, I think, and 15 of those bills actually made it out of the first half of the legislative session. Of course, the most important bill is House Bill 1001, the state budget bill. It's a $26 billion budget that overall does not increase taxes. It does increase funding for property tax relief compared to the last version. It gives almost a 4% statewide average increase on education. And, you know, legislators like myself who were pretty upset in the last budget that with the new funding formula that was introduced, along with the fact that there was less dedicated money put to school funding especially, we were pushing very hard to see major increases this year. Felt pretty positive that we were making strides, but then when you meet with your local school superintendents after they've seen the first round of the school runs, and you kind of get a little demotivated, I guess, after hearing their feedback. So it's not perfect yet. It's an improvement, and hopefully the Senate can work its magic perhaps to make it even a better formula by the time it's all said and done. But that'll be the major focus in the next few weeks is the budget bill, and I'm sure the version that we sent to the Senate will look much different by the time it comes back to the House and we prepare for conference committee. House Bill 1007 is the property tax relief bill that we tried to craft at the request of cities and towns and county government that's looking for a way to, if they need increased funding, try to find a different way to find those funds except from property tax increases. And the plan, I thought, went a long way in giving some flexibility to local officials by allowing them to raise either local income tax, and at one time the version, of course, even would allow corporate income tax increase. But we could not get any bipartisan help on that particular bill. 49 of our 51 Democrats voted for it, and not a single Republican voted in the House to allow some type of property tax relief bill to make it to the Senate. So I'm hoping that something else could still exist before the session is over when it comes to property tax relief, because the budget bill that was passed a couple of years ago failed to fully fund the property tax replacement credits, and that's why you're seeing as much as 15 and 20% increases in property tax statements this year. It's directly a result of the last budget. So the version that we proposed would have taken 75% of the new money that would be allowed to be taxed locally, and it would be sent to property tax relief. The other fourth could be spent for emergency use in your budget. Fire, police, for example, which is something that we support, and we're trying to help our local government after we've tied their hands for so many years on maximizing their levies. As the chairman of the House Commerce, Energy, and Utilities Committee, I probably have been known so far in the first half of the session as the bill killer. Most of the bills in my committee I did not hear. I moved a few. We tried to move a bill on renewable energy resources. This would basically allow Indiana to catch up with several other states who are pushing for ways to find alternative ways to produce electricity that are more friendly to the environment, such as windmills and other renewable items like biomass and such. The bill author, Dale Grubb, who's our caucus chairman, he and I are great friends, but in his effort to try to move along a bill that could get support of the Electric Association, he put in 3 different trackers in the bill that basically allows your utilities to raise the price of the cost of your utilities without going to a rate case in front of the IURC if they want to upgrade their transmission or a distribution of their system. And in many cases, when they try to do this, they can usually get that increase once they do a rate case, but to be able to exempt them from doing tracking, or to be able to allow them to do tracking and to prevent them to go to a rate case for those type of increases, I'm just not there. I'm philosophically opposed to keeping these utilities away from the people who oversee their rates. I think we want to put some checks and balances into place, or at least keep those checks and balances into place. So I've been reluctant to embrace those type of trackers. So since we could not come to an agreement, both their issues along with the renewable bill so far is dead this session, and I've pledged to send both issues to a summer study committee this session. However, since the Senate did send us another version of a bill that deals with tracking on pollution controls, a lot of your power plants, they're preparing for more stringent standards that are being expected federally on getting as much mercury and other emissions out of your air. The bill basically allows them to track the increased cost for what it might take to put on those necessary scrubbers and other pollution control standards. That could be an opportunity for me to bring the renewable issue back, and I might consider that in committee in the next couple of weeks, but we've got a long way to go. And I haven't ruled out just killing that particular bill and sending that issue along with the other tracking issues to summer study. But you're going to hear more about that, I think, in the next couple of weeks on where we go. But just so you'll be rest assured, I'm not going to make it easy for electric industries to raise your utility bill. I think all of you expect us to make sure that the regulated system that we have in place works to benefit consumers, and I'm going to make sure that it continues to be there to be kind of the police, so to speak, of your utilities. Budget bill, property tax relief, increased funding for the most part for schools. That'll again be front and center for the next few weeks. I'm trying to think of the cigarette tax issue, of course, came up last week, in which Representative Brown was trying to advance the governor's initiative for a 25-cent increase on a pack of cigarettes, and the funding would be dedicated to expand insurance coverage for low-income households. Democrats made it very clear in the House that we would help get the job done, but we wanted it to be a bipartisan vote. So the Democrats pledged that they would give no less than 25, if not 26 votes once that bill reached the floor, and made it very clear to the minority party you'd have to bring up 25 votes as well, but they only produced about 19 votes. So the bill was actually defeated this week, because it only had 44 votes of the 51 that was needed. That bill will be very difficult to bring back this late in the game. The only thing I can see is that it might get thrown into the budget, but I think that really makes the budget very difficult to pass if you put a tax increase in the budget bill. So, but that would be the most obvious vehicle. And then I've also been hit hard by my local newspaper in the last week. They're all upset that I-69 funding was not in the budget bill, and I want to explain that one. It had been my preference that the funding for I-69 and 231 and other road projects would clearly be put in the first round of the budget bill. But when the NDOT commissioner came to the Ways and Means Committee a few weeks ago, boy, it's just the wrong group of people to have an attitude with when you're trying to present why you need funding. And besides their normal operational funding, it was pretty much, give us $1.1 billion from the Major Moose account so we can start this very aggressive road construction plan. But yet, when lawmakers tried to zero in on exactly which projects would be at the top of the list, the NDOT commissioner's response was, well, go to our website, all the information is there. And then as they talked about what's on the website, the commissioner admitted that many of the projects are taken in and taken off the list. He kind of called it a box, and some items are put in the box, some items are taken out of the box, which made legislators very uncomfortable, because if you've got a particular project in your region that you're trying to see built, and the commissioner's saying, well, it's in the box, it might be taken out of the box, there's no way to guarantee that your particular project will be funded if you just give them a blank check, the chairman of the committee decided until there was an agreement on exactly what would get funded with this allocation, he was not going to put the amount of money, that particular appropriation, in the budget bill. So that obviously made NDOT officials a bit angry, but what I want to stress today is if you are concerned about those projects. Don't be, because they'll find the magic number that we need to put into the budget, and it will happen when the Senate is done with their version. So that's a short update. I'd be happy to answer your questions, but I'll let Senator Hume take over and give you an update on what's going on in his chamber.
Thank you. I'm going to stand up so I can see everyone. Thanks, Dave, and Nancy, thank you for putting this together. I appreciate it. I know Dave does. The opportunity for us to come here and meet with you.
We also need to thank Al Johnson with VUJC. I forgot to do that earlier. So
Al, yes, thank you. Thank you for hosting this. We appreciate it very much. Listening to Dave and hearing all of the exciting stuff that's going on in the House, it makes me think about what we've done in the Senate, and probably you could count on the fingers of one hand the number of bills that really needed to move forward. The state could probably have survived, maybe even thrived a little better without some of these bills, but we had nearly 500 bills, and I'd like to go through each one of those with you. Senate Bill 1.
He's not joking.
No, I do want to start with Senate Bill 1. Senate Bill 1 was the governor's request for the authority to negotiate a lease of a non-existent highway system to a private company to build an expressway around the south and eastern side of Indianapolis, and make that a toll road that we would simply negotiate a lease. We don't know how long. It would just be giving the governor a blank check to go and negotiate a lease with a company to build that. We don't even know where it would go. The study hasn't been completed. We don't know what the route would be. And simply let him negotiate a lease with a private company to build, operate, charge the tolls, and put an expressway around Indianapolis. May be needed, may be very important, but we had very little to go on with that. He was also wanting the authority to do the same thing with a bypass around Lake County, starting at I-80 and coming around the south side of Lake County and going over to Illinois. So it was a bill that would simply give him the authority to negotiate a lease, very similar to what he did with the toll road in northern Indiana. Negotiate a lease with some private company to come in and build a toll road, and we really have no idea what would the tolls be, what would the cost be, where would it go. So my feeling was it was a little premature. One of the things that the governor wanted to do is tie that to funding of I-69. Now, we had $700 million set aside for I-69, going to build that from Evansville to Crane. $700 million would build that section of I-69. That's going to take a few years. I don't think there's any reason for us to rush into passing Senate Bill 1 and giving the governor that authority without having any more information than the legislature had. So I oppose Senate Bill 1. It did pass. I'm hoping that when it gets to the House that it will meet a little different circumstance and not receive the support of the majority in the House. There are a number of people in both parties who want to see the construction of the Indiana Highway, as it's called, in northern Indiana. So there will be support for it with some of the members of the Democratic caucus in the House. I'm hoping that they can control that bill and not do that at this time. I've often wondered how Nebraska, I believe it's Nebraska, that has a unicameral form of government. I've often wondered how their legislature works, because if you listen to what Dave said and you listen to what I say, we are always passing legislation within high hopes that it will be corrected in the other house. Now, what do they do in Nebraska? Do they have to do it right the first time? You know, that might not be a bad idea if we were to have legislation that says when it passes the House in this form, it can't be amended in the Senate. It can be killed, it can be voted on, but it can't be amended. And then the same thing from the House, from the Senate. If we could pass it and then either accept it or reject it, I think we'd see the legislation written with a little more responsibility. People would be writing the budget bill with what they think will actually be the law. People would be passing bills like Senate Bill 1 that gives the governor the authority to lease for an untold number of years the toll roads. I think we would use a little more responsibility if that were the case. But we always pass legislation and invariably say, and you'll even hear people who present their legislation at the microphone, well, this is not exactly what I want, but we'll clean it up in the House. And I think that's wrong for us to do that. But that's the way it works, and the way it will probably continue to work. Denny, it worked that way when you were there, didn't it?
Yeah, but we only had 60 working days, period.
Yeah.
Calendar.
But we still depended on the other house, and we do that. We passed a full-time or full-day kindergarten bill out of the Senate. That will take effect 2009-2010 school year. That it will be for every child. Now, recognize that kindergarten is not mandatory. No school corporation has to provide kindergarten at all, but this bill does say that if you provide kindergarten, you will, by 2009-2010 school year, have full-day kindergarten. Now, that sounds really good, and I did support it, but where's the funding coming from? In 2009-2010, that's going to cost approximately $250 million. Is the General Assembly going to appropriate that $250 million and its growth each year in the future so that the schools can actually fund full-day kindergarten? My guess is not. We usually do these things that we initiate new programs and we push them down to the local schools, and we don't provide adequate funding. We've done that with so many things, where we've set standards, where we require the I-STEP exams, all of these things that we establish, and you could probably write a book about them, that we push down to local schools and don't fund. And that's a real concern that I have, that as we push full-day kindergarten on to the local school systems, that we will not have the courage to stand up and provide the revenue, which means probably tax increases, to assure that that is funded. If full-day kindergarten is that one component of education that is key, then we should fund it. Should we take out something else? Should we provide additional funding? Whatever, the legislature should do that. But from past experience, I know full well that they won't, and that the school corporations will be put in a position where they have to either do this or that, and if full-day kindergarten is a requirement, that they will then have to fund it, and they'll have to find the money somewhere to do that. It's something we'll probably hear about later on from some of our superintendents who are here, and pleased to see you here. I really appreciate your input into the process. We had so many other bills that went through the legislature. The one that went through during the last few days of the session was one that many of you have heard about and discussed, and that was the leasing of our lottery, turning over the operation of a lottery as a concession to a company to run that lottery. Now, that sounds simple enough and shouldn't be that controversial, except for one minor detail. I don't see how it's going to work. We've got a lottery that's been running now for several years, I think since back in the late 80s, early 90s, that has been consistently providing about $200 million to the state of Indiana. Consistent revenue running in the approximate range of $200 million. This last year it went up to about 215. In some of the years earlier than that it was in the 280s, but on the whole approximately $200 million. Now the way this bill was set up, I think it was 577, the way it was set up, the governor could lease the lottery to a company to run for 35 years, and they would have to pay us up front $1 billion+. He has to get at least $1 billion up front for them to run that concession, but it can be more than that. Now, my concern about the whole process is I'd love to have that $1 million that we could apply to all of these motherhood and apple pie projects that were in that bill, funding of higher education, trying to stop the brain drain and all of those things. All of them very good and part of the legislation. That's where the $1 billion is going to go. But the bill says that a company who does that, a company who gives us $1 billion to run that concession, must, number one, provide us a guaranteed $200 million every year. And if their sales go up, if they make more money, they have to put a large part of that money into a trust fund to make up for years when it goes below $200 million. And at the end of the 35-year period, if there's money in there, that goes to the state too. So first of all, we've said you've got to provide us $200 million each year, plus any profits that you make above that go into a trust fund. And if you look at the percentage breakdown of where the lottery goes today, where the money, all the revenue that's collected from all the tickets that are sold throughout this state, if you look at where that goes today, about 28.5% is that $200 million to the state. That's what we get now. 64% is paid out to the winners of the lottery tickets. So that puts us up to about 92%, 92.5% of all the revenue collected from the lottery. About almost the entire remaining nearly 8% goes to printing tickets, advertising, and distribution of the tickets, just simply running the lottery, about 8%. Now, that's all the money, and if it goes above that, that goes into a trust fund. Now explain to me why a board of directors of a company and the CEO of a company would pay us $1 billion to run that operation with almost no return on that money. The calculations that have been made say that it would take, in that 35 years, they might make back, with what small margin there is in it, they might make back about $800 million. So what company would do that, knowing they're not going to get a return on their money, unless there is an offer to let them expand gaming? Now, I don't think that's a policy that the state of Indiana wants to do, and even in the bill, it prohibits an expansion of gaming. So there is something coming down the road somewhere that's going to expand gaming, because that's the only way a company could ever earn a return on their money. And I am very concerned that this was as I said on the floor of the Senate, that bill is a pig in a poke, because we don't know what's in it. And we don't know what's going to be in it. Very concerned about that. I opposed it. I think it's a bad public policy move. I'm very much opposed to just willy-nilly public-private partnerships. The state of Indiana has been able to run our business and do it very well. We're here to deliver services, and we're not here to make a profit. If a company can run a business or part of our state's agencies better than we can and still make a profit, then we ought to learn how to run it better ourselves and use that profit to either reduce taxes or provide better services. So anyway, that's what's going on in the Senate, and I'll be happy to try to answer any questions that you have.
Okay,
And I'll turn it over to Nancy.
the TV would like to have a mic go around so that it picks up better when the people ask the questions. So Paul has a microphone. And then if you could
Testing.
state, is that working, Paul?
Yeah.
Okay.
But by the way, speaking of the lottery, it's my understanding that one of the new opponents of the lottery lease is the Indiana Broadcasters Association. Have you heard this?
No, I haven't.
It's my understanding that, according to the lobbyist that I spoke with a few weeks ago, that if you look at the law on lotteries, it's illegal to advertise gambling on TV or radio. But several years ago, when the state started passing lotteries, the FCC finally made a decision that they would exempt states that have their own state-operated lotteries, and they would allow them to advertise on broadcast stations. Well, there's concern amongst TV and radio stations that if the lottery is operated by a private company and is no longer state-operated, that exemption would go away, and the Hoosier Lottery could not be promoted on radio or TV. So, if you think about the power that broadcasters have had, especially on things like daylight saving time, there's a lot of clout there that I think broadcasters, it may take them 30 years, but they'll eventually get it done, won't they, Paul? But anyway, but seriously, I mean, this, now, personally, I don't make a dime off the lottery at my radio station, because what lottery advertising my radio station takes comes through a network arrangement through Network Indiana, just like it does in Jasper, although they might get more money than I do, because that's a long story. But anyway, but my point is that because I'm already clearing network ads, I'm not getting a direct buy from the lottery. So I just want you to know that there's no conflict for me on that particular reason on why I'd be against the lottery being privatized. But I do think that's a new consideration that a lot of legislators are just discovering. When your TV stations and radio stations are against it, that does carry some weight. So just wanted to add that to it. Speaker's already said that bill's likely dead.
Good
Okay,
for
we
you.
have a question, so state your name and your question. Or
Your name.
My
Who is
question
it?
was
Into the
simple.
microphone.
I think it's already been answered by Dave, Representative Crooks. The word is privatization, and it was something that the governor was promoting. Big time.
Okay. You have a question, Bill? You can just pass it.
Sure. Bill Schmidt, the mayor of Jasper, have about three things I'd like for you to comment on. Dave, you already talked about House Bill 1007. Is that it didn't come out of the House? We call it Hometown Matters, or a portion of Hometown Matters. Do you see any future for that in the Senate? I know Senator Kenley was certainly hoping that something would happen this year along those lines. Lindel, is there any chance that any portion of this will come back in the Senate? And just to add, follow up on that, if there's no new money, and I don't want to use that term new money because I don't think you can call public safety anything new, but if there's no additional money for cities and towns and counties in this property tax relief bill, then personally I would not be in favor of it.
Well, your question was, I think, is there hope that something may be done in the Senate? And my answer is yes. I think that there will be something done in the Senate. Where we ran into a problem in the House, and this is something that legislators and candidates for the legislature like to do, and that is to promise their constituents that they will not vote for a tax increase. And at the same time, they like to promise their constituents that they will do everything they can to reduce property taxes. Well, there's only two ways you can reduce property taxes, and one is by reducing services. You can cut out things like funding of schools, which is the biggest user of property tax. No one wants to do that. The other thing you can do is to replace property taxes by raising other taxes, which is what I've advocated for years, and that is considered by some to be a tax increase, even if there is no net increase in taxes. They still view that as a tax increase, even by voting for legislation that would permit local units of government to raise their revenues by an income tax of some type rather than property tax. Now, it seems strange to me that many legislators will year after year after year vote for the budget that has almost a mandatory property tax increase in it, and especially for school funding, and still they will not vote for giving local units of government the option to use something other than property tax. They're both tax increases. They're voting for one or the other, and so I think they're playing political games when they do that. I was very disappointed that 1007 did not pass the House. I was hoping we'd have some, and I was pleased with the direction that the House was going with 1007. I thought it was a good start, and Senator Kenley and I have worked together in past years to try to craft something that we could get through the House of Representatives. But it doesn't seem to make any difference who's in control of the House of Representatives. The members of the House, who have to run every 2 years, do not want to vote for anything that's going to be tagged as a tax increase. So it's very difficult to get tax restructuring through. And I'm sure that with the rules of the Senate as they are, that says any bill that comes from the House that addresses any kind of revenue-raising measure can be amended in the Senate any way we want to amend it. So I'm sure that there will be something that comes to the Senate that we will be able to put some kind of alternative tax program in for property tax reduction, along with other optional taxes for local units of government.
Thank you. And David, I want to thank you and Denny and Russ for voting for that. That was very important to cities and towns. I'd like to follow up with Senate Bill 396. They passed out of the Senate 44-3, and this is a bill that gives some immunity to public safety in the performance of their duty. And, for example, in pursuits of criminals.
Yeah.
And thank you, Lindel, for voting for that, and hope that the House will see that this gets passed. And it's Senate Bill 396. And then the last thing is funding for the manufacturing technology building here at VUJC. I would hope that both of you support this. It's very important to the manufacturers. The Du Bois County Area Development Corporation strongly supports that, and the members of that and the industry here see it as an absolutely must if we're going to continue to be a manufacturing center like Du Bois County is.
Well, I must say that the House did pass that funding for the advanced technology centers for VU in both Du Bois and Gibson counties. That funding was there, and we are going to work very hard to keep it there because I know Dave supports it, I support it, and Craig Battles was the one who had a bill. He's the representative from Vincennes. He had a bill that would have funded that, and it was wrapped into the budget. His bill was placed in the budget. I think our biggest problem is the Senate majority and the head of the Appropriations Committee, Senator Bob Meeks, getting him to agree to keep it in. That is key, and I do know that there are efforts that are underway already to convince him that that needs to be in the final budget. Now, whether they take it out in the Senate to send a message to the House or whatever political games they want to play, I'm hoping that when the final conference committee is put together, and I hope to be at least an advisor on that conference committee, that we will be able to keep the funding in for that, because it's key for advanced manufacturing in southwestern Indiana, and having that facility here would be terribly important to Du Bois County and all the surrounding area. I would hope that businesses and business leaders in this community that are in favor of that would contact either by email, telephone, or simply writing a letter to Senator Bob Meeks.
And the speaker's already said that bill's likely dead.
Good
Okay,
for
we
you.
have a question, so state your name and your question or
Your
comment.
name.
My
Who is
question was simple. I think it's already been answered by Dave, Representative Crooks. The word is privatization, and it was something that the governor was promoting. Big time.
Yeah.
Okay. You have a question? Bill? You can just pass it.
Sure. Bill Schmidt, the mayor of Jasper, have about three things I'd like for you to comment on. Dave, you already talked about House Bill 1007. Is that it didn't come out of the House? We call it Hometown Matters, or a portion of Hometown Matters. Do you see any future for that in the Senate? I know Senator Kenley was certainly hoping that something would happen this year along those lines. Lindel, is there any chance that any portion of this will come back in the Senate? And just to add, follow up on that, if there's no new money, and I don't want to use that term new money because I don't think you can call public safety anything new, but if there's no additional money for cities and towns and counties in this property tax relief bill, then personally I would not be in favor of it.
Well, your question was, I think, is there hope that something may be done in the Senate? And my answer is yes. I think that there will be something done in the Senate. Where we ran into a problem in the House, and this is something that legislators and candidates for the legislature like to do, and that is to promise their constituents that they will not vote for a tax increase. And at the same time, they like to promise their constituents that they will do everything they can to reduce property taxes. Well, there's only two ways you can reduce property taxes, and one is by reducing services, You can cut out things like funding of schools, which is the biggest user of property tax. No one wants to do that. The other thing you can do is to replace property taxes by raising other taxes, which is what I've advocated for years, and that is considered by some to be a tax increase, even if there is no net increase in taxes. They still view that as a tax increase, even by voting for legislation that would permit local units of government to raise their revenues by an income tax of some type rather than property tax. Now, it seems strange to me that many legislators will year after year after year vote for the budget that has almost a mandatory property tax increase in it, and especially for school funding, and still they will not vote for giving local units of government the option to use something other than property tax. They're both tax increases. They're voting for one or the other, and so I think they're playing political games when they do that. I was very disappointed that 1007 did not pass the House. I was hoping we'd have some, and I was pleased with the direction that the House was going with 1007. I thought it was a good start, and Senator Kinley and I have worked together in past years to try to craft something that we could get through the House of Representatives. But it doesn't seem to make any difference who's in control of the House of Representatives. The members of the House, who have to run every 2 years, do not want to vote for anything that's going to be tagged as a tax increase. So it's very difficult to get tax restructuring through. And I'm sure that with the rules of the Senate as they are, that says any bill that comes from the House that addresses any kind of revenue-raising measure can be amended in the Senate any way we want to amend it. So I'm sure that there will be something that comes to the Senate that we will be able to put some kind of alternative tax program in for property tax reduction, along with other optional taxes for local units of government.
Thank you. And David, I want to thank you and Denny and Russ for voting for that. That was very important to cities and towns. I'd like to follow up with Senate Bill 396. They passed out of the Senate 44-3, and this is a bill that gives some immunity to public safety in the performance of their duty. And, for example, in pursuits of criminals. Yeah. And thank you, Lindel, for voting for that, and hope that the House will see that this gets passed. And it's Senate Bill 396. And then the last thing is funding for the manufacturing technology building here at VUJC. I would hope that both of you support this. It's very important to the manufacturers. The Du Bois County Area Development Corporation strongly supports that, and the members of that and the industry here see it as an absolutely must if we're going to continue to be a manufacturing center like Du Bois County is.
Well, I must say that the House did pass that funding for the Advanced Technology Centers for VU in both Du Bois and Gibson counties. That funding was there, and we are going to work very hard to keep it there because I know Dave supports it, I support it, and Craig Battles was the one who had a bill. He's the representative from Vincennes. He had a bill that would have funded that, and it was wrapped into the budget. His bill was placed in the budget. I think our biggest problem is the Senate majority and the head of the Appropriations Committee, Senator Bob Meeks, getting him to agree to keep it in. That is key, and I do know that there are efforts that are underway already to convince him that that needs to be in the final budget. Now, whether they take it out in the Senate to send a message to the House or whatever political games they want to play, I'm hoping that when the final conference committee is put together, and I hope to be at least an advisor on that conference committee, that we will be able to keep the funding in for that, because it's key for advanced manufacturing in southwestern Indiana, and having that facility here would be terribly important to Du Bois County and all the surrounding area. I would hope that businesses and business leaders in this community that are in favor of that would contact either by email, telephone, or simply writing a letter to Senator Bob Meeks, who is the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, and let him know how important that is to our area.
I know we've had DC have already made arrangements for a meeting with local CEOs with Senator Meeks, and along those same lines, if you see anything happening where you need some support from the local area, whether it's the political leaders here or owners and CEOs of our larger industries, if you let us know, we'll be there. So we think it's important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One back, Bob.
Okay, does anyone else have a
Bob has
question?
one back here.
Don?
I got my guard up.
Bob, where'd I get Bob? Don.
On the last subject, do we still have the difference in that funding for the Gibson County part of that being cash and the Du Bois County part of it being bonding authority for the advanced manufacturing program?
I'm trying to remember.
There were two different kinds of funding for that program
he's right.
in
I'm
the
trying-
initial legislation.
I think they're both stand
Okay.
the way it was proposed.
Let me ask a question about privatization, since it is bite your tongue, bad kind of word to use around here. You don't have to look very far from Du Bois County to find examples of privatization, and I wonder how you feel about the kinds of privatization that goes on at the local government level. And the first example I want to use is with the contracting out of services for the assessment of property. Noticed in the middle of January, legal notice that the the township assessors were contracting out for professional services to do the assessment of new properties since March of last year. That's an example of privatization, and it is also paid for by property taxes. That is, the service is paid for by property taxes. County commissioners are the ones who let that contract, so I'm sure they know exactly how many dollars we're talking about there. And they also have a pretty good idea of what the cost of assessment of property by private services has been over the last several years since the 2002 reassessment. So we don't have to look very far to see examples of privatization. And the question really is, who can provide the services in the most efficient and effective, cost-effective way? There isn't any reason to promote privatization unless it is of a benefit to the tax-paying public.
I would agree with you 100%. If privatization makes sense for the tax-paying public, then that should be done. But the assessing that you were referring to is something that we've done for many years. Assessors and through the commission have been able to sign contracts to have assessing done. I don't know if they've contracted it out here before, but other areas have. But the difference, as I see it, between that kind of managed privatization by local government and what we're looking at from the state level is we didn't privatize the assessor's office. And from the state level, some of what we're trying to do is basically say we're going to turn over the operation of the whole thing to a private company. If you look at what happened with FSSA, we have contracted out with the company to operate, and it says IBM, but it's actually ACS. ACS is a company that Mitch Robe was the vice president of, and if you don't know Mitch Robe, he's the current head of FSSA. He came from that company to FSSA, then he contracted out for $1.16 billion the operation of many of the services of FSSA, providing services to the people with Medicaid and food stamps and that kind of thing. Now, I see that as being different, where that we're taking that part of state government that is an agency and turning it over to a private company. And the assessor, on the other hand, is the one that the buck stops here. They're the ones that have to answer it, and if the contracting company doesn't respond properly, then they will be replaced. One of the problems I have with what the governor is doing is the long-term contracts. This contract with ACS or IBM was a 10-year contract. That's going to run beyond, even if the governor is reelected, that's going to run beyond the term of his service as governor. It's going to be affecting the next administration that comes down the line. The lottery was a 35-year lease, and the toll road was a 75-year lease. And we don't know what the toll road for the Illinois Expressway and what they call the Commerce Connector around Indianapolis would be. But those are privatizing things that that are well beyond just having a local company provide you with supplies or that type of privatization.
Don,
Well,
there's one privatization that the governor has done that I fully support. The company that now is in charge of the state employees' cafeteria at the government center, the food's much better, and they've done a better job with the. I'm serious. The cafeteria at state government, I'll have to give him credit. They privatized it, went with a private concessionaire. The food quality is better, and the overall operation of our state cafeteria is better. That's one example where I think it's worked well. But I'm like Senator Hume. Some of these things we're doing, you know, we're just hoping that it's all going to work 75 and 99 years from now. And boy, when you think about who was running government 75 and 90 years prior, there's just a lot of change and a lot of things that we just have a hard time forecasting that we don't know what to expect.
Well, part of the reason for long-term contracts certainly is that you take some of the political aspects out of it because you're running it over the course of a number of different administrations. But let me say another thing about my example with the assessing and what your response was, Senator. In the case of the contracting the assessment duties, we're not doing away with assessors, but we're paying somebody else to do the work. And I think that's
But your assessor is going to be
responsible.
Instead of some private company who might have an operator who lives in Fort Wayne, you know.
Well, we'll let Gail respond to that.
Talk to the assessor.
Gail Grummelsbacher, Du Bois County Assessor. The fact of the new construction contract is we're not taking all of the new construction away from the township assessors. They're still doing the majority of the work. This is a commercial industrial contract, so that we have one company that looks at commercial buildings, industrial buildings, has the expertise to know the best way to assess those. The law gives you 3 options for assessing those now, and we have to look at that. They will also do maybe some of the more complicated houses in the county if, you know, the township assessors want some help. In many cases, the company and the assessor go out together. So it's not like we're taking all the responsibility, all the work away from the assessor. We're just giving them some help. And when it's all completed and there is a price put on it, an assessment put on it, the end result goes back to the assessor. He has to make the call whether the assessment stays or whether we need to look at it again before it goes out. So even though we are giving them some help, we're not taking away their responsibility. we're not taking away the majority of their work. They're still doing it.
I don't want to speak for Don, but I don't think he was singling out assessors as, I think he was trying to make a point. Privatization takes place, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not.
I understand that, and we have used privatization in hiring professional companies to help us with assessing for a long time. But in our case, it's a one-year contract that we look at every year, so.
Yeah.
Gail, is that a 3-year or 1-year contract?
1 year.
So that's only a 1-year contract versus 35 years, I guess.
You could have got a better deal, Larry, if you
75
cut a 75-year deal, but, you know.
Okay, want to move on to another question?
You know, if I don't have no question here, but I just want to comment on Don. That's a 1-year contract versus a 35-year or a 75-year. I mean, if the company, or maybe for a better word, I guess, screws up, you know, after 1 year, they're gone, and we're not wasting taxpayers' dollars. We'll get another company in to do it. So there's a little bit of difference between 35 and 75 years versus 1-year contract.
Okay, another question? Then we'll take yours next.
My name's Herbert Welp. I'm a resident of Jasper and a local taxpayer also. I have one question. House Bill 1378. It was co-sponsored by Suzanne Crouch and Trent Van Haflin of Mount Vernon. It concerns insurance companies covering alcoholics and drug addicts. Do you know anything about that?
I remember that briefly, but I can't recall if the bill actually advanced. I don't think it actually made it out of the House. But
It didn't make it
I
out.
don't think so.
I think it's a bad thing.
Well, since it didn't make, I don't think we voted on it, so I guess it must have been a bad thing.
If it did, I assure you we'll clean it up.
We'll make it non-alcoholic.
Sir, I'd like to confront the billing of Interstate 69. I may be. Oh, my name's Tom Bird. I live here in Jasper. I moved up here about 5 years ago, and I seen a high volume of traffic on 231. Is there going to be any kind of construction work on 231 to run up to the new interstate?
Yes, eventually it's on the list. They're telling us. So yeah, it's on the 10-year program.
You know, through 3 different administrations, I've tried to get that part of I-69 from Washington to Bloomington to actually come over and incorporate 231 as opposed to going up through the center of Davies County to Newberry and then across to Bloomington. My feeling was that we are going to be having to put money into 231, and if we could have included that as part of the I-69 construction, it would have we would have got twice the amount for our money, and it would have provided greater access to I-69 by all of the citizens of this southwestern Indiana area.
My worry is if we take Lindel's suggestion, we'll be 40 more years trying to retake a route. So.
And with all of the environmental impact studies, the economic impact studies, and the federal requirements, he's probably right.
Sir, I'd like to ask you one more question about the survey that was put out. In that survey, it said, I came here late and I apologize.
Which survey,
I might
by
have
the
missed
way?
some of it.
Which survey?
The legislator put a survey out.
Oh, okay.
I didn't, but
Probably mine then.
Yes. Anyway, you said on there, do you think people that drive trucks should wear seat belts? Now, you got 60% yes on that, and I would like to know, is that 60% yes, people that are required to drive cars are saying, well, I have to drive it, they should too.
Well, remember, there's so many people now that are excluded from seat belts because they label their SUV or van as a truck.
I have an SUV.
Okay, you probably paid the extra amount of money to pretend like it's a truck, right? So you can exempt yourself
I went from a truck to SUV and trained my license.
Okay,
Okay,
yeah.
but I do have an SUV.
Okay,
But do you feel like the question should like being asked how a person feels about seatbelts. Myself, I think they're unconstitutional because if you got 60% says yes, like I said, most of those people say, well, I have to wear it, why don't they? I may sound a little way off than what the discussion's about here, but I do believe that the question wasn't put right. To me, I think it's unconstitutional, and the government shouldn't interfere with some of that kind of stuff. I believe the question should have been asked, how do you feel about a seatbelt, and whether you think it's constitutional or not. Because people are asking Ford truck people who work pickup trucks. I talked to 10 people here in Jasper that drives trucks. 9 out of the 10 doesn't use the seatbelt. And the one that did use a seatbelt was company policy. And I talked to 10 people who drive automobiles. 70% of them drive but use seatbelt because they are required to. So,
you have your right to have an opinion, but I guess my opinion would be seatbelts are almost like whether or not you should have a polio vaccine.
Absolutely right, sir.
I mean, it's just,
yes.
It's
I
the
believe,
proof
I
it
believe
saves
that.
lives, it saves money, and for the common good, I supported it. And,
And that's an opinion you have, and I definitely believe that everybody should have that right to make a decision whether they use a seatbelt or not for whatever reason. Next year or next month, they might be requiring us to wear helmets. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, another question? No questions?
Oh,
None
wow.
from the schools?
What? No, you didn't say complaints, you said questions.
I'll raise a school issue.
You
How
do it.
about that? Again, back to the budget bill. It was interesting with what it did not include as well as what it did include. For instance, what it did include was like a bar for merit pay, no merit pay programs. Wasn't that a piece of that budget bill? But anyway, there wasn't any funding for the money that is owed to local governments and universities and schools, back pay for money that's owed. And given the circumstances we're hearing about the financial problems that the schools are in, certainly I hope that gets added in the Senate version. Just as I would very much like to see not a total elimination of the property tax, but shifting at least to the general fund burden from the property tax to state level tax funding in some fashion.
Well, Don, you know that we have made that effort to make that shift from property tax on the general fund to the state paying that, which I totally support. And we made some moves in doing that, but then during this last budget, we sort of froze it. And I hope that we can get back on track. Now, you were saying that you weren't necessarily in favor of total elimination of property tax, which I can understand. I'd like for us to get away from using property tax. I think it's an unfair and obsolete system, but I think that we need to do it incrementally. I filed a bill this year that didn't get a hearing that would have simply said that the school general fund could not be funded by property tax. Now, the reason I felt it needed to be in the Constitution is I have seen what the General Assemblies do from year to year. We'll one year say, well, we're going to raise taxes like the sales tax so that we can pay more of the school fund and reduce property taxes. And then 2 years later, a next General Assembly comes along and they say, oh, well, they were just kidding about that. We're going to let property taxes go back up. So you've got the increase in the sales tax plus an increase in the property tax. So I am concerned that if we don't put it in the Constitution, that it's always going to be subject to the next General Assembly or the next administration or whoever to to back off of what we have agreed to do. And we'll have both taxes go up, and that just seems to be the way it works. So I think that's why it's so important to have that in the Constitution. And unfortunately, in the Senate, there was a bill filed, and I was on it as one of the co-authors, looking for ways to replace property tax completely. That bill got a hearing, mine didn't. And I think it might had something to do with who was the first author of the bill. Because the chairman of the Tax and Fiscal Policy Committee said, you know, I really agree with what you've got more than I do this other bill, but I'm going to give them a hearing on it.
Would you say putting that in the Constitution is like having a long-term contract?
With the people. Yes.
Hey,
with
let
the
me
people.
make a correction. You mentioned 1378 earlier, and I've been thinking about that bill since he mentioned that. I think I know what he's talking about now, and the bill did pass. The bill involved, apparently, insurance companies have been becoming selective on whether or not they're going to pay for a health benefit if you're intoxicated. And I think in this particular legislation, the bill said something to the effect that if you're in an auto accident and you are intoxicated, they can't just say, oh, sorry, we're not going to insure you. I think that was part of the argument that both Representative Van Haften and Representative Crouch were making, that let's say you're in your lounger on a Sunday afternoon and you've had a few drinks watching football and you decide to ride with your spouse to go get a meal and someone hits you on your way to that restaurant. Well, you would hate to have your insurance company say, well, we're not going to cover your health insurance coverage for the passenger because he happened to have alcohol in his blood system. So I'm pretty sure that law was to protect them so that insurance companies couldn't just say, well, we're not going to provide insurance if you're intoxicated or under the influence.
There was a lady there by the name of Julia Elberg, I believe. She represented the hospital for them. In other words, she was looking out for their own interests.
So the note you got, was it for or against the bill?
The note I got?
Yeah.
No.
Or what you heard about the bill?
I wasn't for it.
Okay. Well, the bill is designed to protect people, so that way if you are involved in an accident, an insurance company can't just say, well, we're not going to provide you coverage. It's designed to be pro-consumer, not anti-consumer.
This evening's rebroadcast of the Legislative Breakfast has been brought to you exclusively by Springs Valley Bank and Trust, where the focus is on you.